This is our sermon series. We're going to talk more about prophecy, apocalyptic type language in Daniel, which we're almost done with. Then we're going to go right to Revelation and see what's being talked about there. So today's topic, we'll call it Message Revealed. It's another message revealed unto Daniel. We'll look at Daniel chapter 8. We'll spend most of our time there. We'll also spend some time outside of our Bible we have with us, into what's known as a deuterocanonical type book, which is in some Bibles, but not in all. Because there's a question as far as whether it's, inspired by God or not. It's at least an historical text. The question is it an inspired text? And it comes from 1 Maccabees, which we're going to go into today for a certain reason, because what Daniel sees in chapter 8 here is revealed in the time the Maccabean people were alive and writing down histories and things like that. So the historical aspects, I see no question. The inspirational parts of that, Maccabees, questions. That's why it's not a part of the Bible, I think. So we start in Daniel chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision, after the one that already appeared to me. In my vision I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam. In the vision I was beside the Ulai Canal. So, the year is now 551 BC, 2 years since the priest recorded the vision. So we really fast forward. I mean, last week it was 2 years ago. That's a quick movement for us. Nonetheless, verses 3 and 4, we start to see the vision. And this vision will parallel parts of the previous, and also not all at the same time, which is kind of interesting about it. Where he says, I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns, standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as he charged toward the west, and the north, and the south. No animal could stand against him, and none could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and became great. We're going to change up what we did from last week. Last week we went through the entire vision, and then went into interpretation. This we're going to go back and back, because Daniel explains the interpretation in the chapter. So let's go to verse 20. So we're going to go boop, 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 through chapter 8. Verse 20, we see a little bit of what it represents. It says in Daniel, the 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. So the Medes and Persians. Again, just like what we saw before in some of our previous visions, after Babylon would come Media and Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome, and things like that in our other previous visions. Now, the idea of a ram, and this type of vision in these type of things, usually means princely power. Power, but in a princely type manner. And the 3 directions agree with the 3 ribs from the previous vision he had. And there's a belief that the higher horn is likely Persia. Some say it was King Darius. Nevertheless, it corresponds the same type of way. And note the 3 directions, the conquests were not to the east. No east. Just west, predominantly west, a little bit north, a little bit south, but mostly to the west. Wait, that's north. Mostly to the west. Alright? And no one could stand up against Persia until Greece rose to the challenge, as we see now in verses 5 through 7. Verses 5 through 7 of chapter 8. As I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. He came toward the 2-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and charged at him in great rage. I saw him attack the ram and shattering his 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him. The goat knocked him to the ground and trampled on him, and none could rescue the ram from his power. The explanation, verse 21. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes is the first king. First major king of Greece, Alexander the Great, right? So as far as an illustration type thing, perhaps it looked like this. Perhaps. But imagine, the goat is a swift, fast goat. Remember how the verse said it was like moving so fast to the west, his feet were touching the ground. An awesome sprint, right towards the ram, knocking him down, trampling their feet, destroying him and taking his spot, and becoming bigger and greater. I always ponder why, a lot of people who do movies and stuff focus upon trying to create new or redo old, when they can make a story out of this stuff. I'd love to see this movie. That'd be kind of cool, wouldn't it? The things you can do with it, the CGI nowadays, it'd be kind of interesting. So the symbol of a rough goat, or the hairy goat, the swift goat, etc., was in reference to Greece. Now Greece came and conquered from the west. It was swift, it was sure-footed, which means it moved rather quickly, very quickly. But also, we see Alexander's demise is also quite quick for him himself. His life was short. I want to now talk about, and give you a quick little thing from history a little bit, from 1 Maccabees chapter 1. I would say turn there, but you kind of can't. Unless you have a Bible app with all kinds of extra books into it. This comes from 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. Now again, I'm not saying, by using this text, that this text is literally words of God. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, these are people who grew up into the time that these prophecies happened and came to fruition, and they're looking with eyes like, here's what's happening now, and here's what Daniel said, and here's what things are matching up, right in accordance to that prophecy. So that's why I'm using these texts, not because I'm saying that they're authored by God directly. So after Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came from the land of Kittim, had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes, he succeeded him as king. He previously became king of Greece. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and put to death the kings of earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted. His heart was filled up. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes. They became tributary to him. After this, he fell sick and perceived that he was dying. So he summoned his most honored officers, who had been brought up with him from youth, and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive, into 4. Remember that 4 from previous? Yeah. So after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and stood their descendants after them for many years. And they caused many evils on the earth. So, we see all that, but the story's not done yet. We see Alexander the Great's in power. He abdicates because, well, he dies. 4 take up. We see separation, further separation. But the story isn't done. Daniel chapter 8, verse 8. The goat became very great, that the height of his power, his large horn, was broken off. That's Alexander the Great. In its place, 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. So there's your separation into 4. Daniel chapter 8, verse 22 explains this a little bit further, where it says, the 4 horns that replaced the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power. And all this agrees with the prophecy of the leopard, which we talked about previously last week. And also a little bit about the previous one before, when we had the image of the man with the head of gold and so on. Now, speaking of a horn in this type of language symbolizes power, authority, dominion, and to some degree strength. So we see one was broken and divided into 4 separate powers, smaller, lesser than the previous. But the story is not done. Verses 9 through 12. We see the 4 horns are there. It moves on. Out of one of them came another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south and to the east, and toward the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of the heavens. It threw some of the starry host down to earth and trampled them. It set itself up to be as great as the prince of the host. It took away the daily sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was brought low. Because of rebellion, the host of the saints and daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. Interesting. One may think, after hearing that, it's something about like an antichrist type aspect. Remember, previously, this antichrist isn't one person, it's a whole bunch of different people with antichrist thoughts, ideas, elements, and things like that. So this verse kind of gives people a little bit of confusion, but look at the interpretation. Verses 23 through 25. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He'll become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation, will succeed whenever he does. He will destroy the mighty men and the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper. He will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many, take his stand against the Prince of Princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human hands. A little horn from one of the four horns. Rather than me just tell you all this stuff kind of mentioned, 1 Maccabees chapter 1 talks about this particular person. This person was already alive. If you're not, he's dead. He came and passed, but he caused immense destruction upon the people of Israel. In 1 Maccabees it says, "From them came forth a single root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus. He had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. After subduing Egypt, he returned in the 143rd year, went up against Israel, came to Jerusalem with a strong force, arrogantly entered the sanctuary, took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, and all its utensils. He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, the gold decoration in front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance." Right there, we're seeing things line up, right? That's kind of what Daniel saw coming. It's not done yet. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers. And it became their citadel. Remember what Daniel was talking about? He was taken to a citadel and looked out around? One may ponder. They stationed there a sinful people, men who were renegades. They strengthened their position. They stored up arms and goods, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there and became a great menace. For the citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel at all times. On every side of the sanctuary, they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. So one may kind of make the assumption, which I think is accurate so, that Daniel was talking about this particular individual. So much sorrow, so much destruction. But, as the prophecy said, although everything would go his way, at the end he'd be taken down and taken out, but not by human hands. He would come to an end as prophesied. 1 Maccabees chapter 6 talks about this. Also, many of you may have heard about the works of Josephus. So about Josephus, interesting historical text. It comes from also a perspective of Christian church heritage also. Talks about this additionally. I forget where at though, so I can't quote the exact part. When the king heard this news, he was astounded and badly shaken. Now, what news? Things weren't going his way. He was losing battles. He never lost battles. All of a sudden he started losing battle, losing battle, losing battle. He's not gaining. He's been losing a little bit of structure and land and bounty. He's getting concerned. He took to his bed and became sick from disappointment because things had not turned out for him as he had planned. He lay there for many days because deep disappointment continually gripped him. and he realized that he was dying. He called all his friends and said to them, "Sleep has departed from my eyes, and I am downhearted with worry. I said to myself, to what distress I have come, and into what a great flood I am now plunged. For I was kind and beloved in my power." Now, you heard the story. That's the image of he that has him for himself. He says, "I'm kind. Everybody loves me in my power." Israel's like, "Do you recall what happened? Do you know what's going on?" He says, "But now I remember the wrong I did in Jerusalem. I seized all its vessels of silver and gold. I sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judah without good reason. I know that it is because of this that these misfortunes come upon me. Here I am, perishing of bitter disappointment in a strange land." And such was his destruction. Such was indeed the end, as foretold. Daniel chapter 8, verse 13 through 14. Daniel talks and says, and writes down here, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him." So we see holy one and holy one. It's really thought these are two angels talking, is the thought process behind this one. "How long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary, and of the host that will be trampled underfoot. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated." Interesting number. 2,300. Right? Interpretation. Verses 26 and 27. "The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been given you is true, but seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future." Now, we think distant because we're alive now, so that probably happens like to us in our future. No, this is our past. But for them, it was distant future. Because for them, this idea of Antiochus Epiphanes, this is hundreds of years. Daniel has this vision around, I think it's 551, and we see Greece right there, some approximating maybe 200 BC, a rough approximation. Sorry, I didn't write it down. Rough approximation. And it says, "The vision of the evenings and mornings has been given you is true, but seal up the vision concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was exhausted, lay ill for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding." For him, of course, right? He sees all this and he says, okay, well, that means this means this. They know about the Medes and Persians, know about the Greeks, but then this guy comes up in Greece. You got no idea what's going to come, what this person really means, how soon? 2,300 days. There is some variability in our understanding of this. Some thought it was a literal 2,300 days. Some thought, no, it's 2,300 days of sacrifice. Others said, well, if you look at that and do the math kind of thing, and say, well, it's short of 7 years. And 7 is a little number of perfection and finality and completeness. So this is short of perfect punishment. So there's some variability in that. But if you take the literal number of days or sacrifices, you can see years. I didn't put it in the sermon. You can see years that kind of line up with Antiochus Epiphanes. Either one will line up with him. Even the short of 7 years kind of lines up with him. So it seems to be clear that that's what was talking about. But the idea that this punishment was an imperfect punishment or short of perfect punishment is indeed an interesting one, as it can be referenced in some ways when we get to the book of Revelation. A little bit about the idea of days. Because days don't actually mean like one day is one day, or even one day is 1 year. It's more symbolic than things like that. So I personally think it's the third, not the first, one of the first two. But that's just me. I can't say God said that because I can't find a verse where God says, no, I meant this kind of thing. I lack that ability to see it and say that. But it appears that way. But recognize the interesting idea, interesting message there. That we see interesting things come up and go. God gave a message to Daniel in a dream, in a vision, and said, hey, coming up are the Medes and Persians. And then there they were. They were coming up. Babylon was going away. They were rising up. They're going to be a lasting kingdom for quite some time, but will be destroyed by Greece, Alexander the Great. Yes, we saw that happen in history. And the split of the power from him to the four generals. Yes, we saw that into four separate kingdoms. And from one did come this Antiochus Epiphanes, who did much destruction to the sanctuary, to the temple, and things like that throughout Jerusalem. Yes, we saw that. And also, we saw his destruction. Now, there's a biblical study called typology, where it says, yes, there's a physical rendering happening, but it also has application in a spiritual sense. There's a spiritual application of this unto us in the kingdom, unto Satan himself. That Satan, working against Jesus and getting Judas to side and to turn him in, that Satan thinking he has the upper hand, that Satan thinking he's got the Savior destroyed. But then God swoops in and uses that as the pathway to bring about salvation for mankind. And there's a type into that, into the future. But, topic for another day. So, we may have one more topic of Daniel, we may not, I'm not quite sure. Then I'll get to some Revelation type things that have brought about some questions that result in this little series, but we'll see how that progresses from that. So keep mindful of the idea that God has vision of totality of history, that he looks and he sees not just past, but he sees present and he sees future all at the same time. It's hard for us to comprehend because we exist in the here and now and our future is not told yet for us. Yet God sees and knows what's going to happen, when and how and who and why. And occasionally, he shares a little bit to us and shows us what will be for reasons and purposes we can't always fully comprehend. But in time we know. And this is the time that we share together an invitation to decision